you don't come play with us, then we will kill you.
Welcome back to season 3 of the Dudes of the Dead podcast. If you missed season 1 or season 2, including our top 10s of 2021 and 2022, you can find all of our previous episodes on Apple, Spotify, Anchor, and Google. I'm Leatherface Lee.
And I'm Maniac Mike. This season, we've added an email for the show, dudesofthedead@gmail.com. Feel free to email us your thoughts on the films we discuss, and we're also asking for listener requests for season 4. So email us a film if you'd like us to review it in season 4, whether it's a personal favorite, a controversial film, or a hidden gem starring Nicolas Cage.
We can't wait for you to listen to season 3, including some appearances from friends of the pod, as well as some bonus episodes. We're also on YouTube at Dudes of the Dead podcast.
This season, we're excited to review some standouts from 2022, some older classics, and as well as some new films from 2023. We'd also greatly appreciate if you'd be willing to leave us a rating and a review. Thanks for joining us again, and
We'll see you in the aisles.
Welcome back, listeners, as we continue our season 3 apparent focus on found footage films, as we have yet another one for you today. And this is Be My Cat, a film for Anne, and this is from 2015. So this is a found footage film directed and starring Romanian filmmaker Adrian Tofei. This got 5.8 on Internet Movie Database, an 88% critic score on Rotten Tomatoes with a 70% audience score.
Hello, Anne. My name is Adrian. I'm from Romania, and I want to make a movie with you. I saw you in Dark Knight Rises, and you're my actress. This is a film I'm making right now to convince you to come here and make that movie with me.
So here's the synopsis, and this is from Adrian himself, apparently. An aspiring Romanian filmmaker and actor obsessed with Hollywood actress Anne Hathaway tries to convince her to come to Romania and star alongside him in his upcoming film. He goes to shocking extremes using 3 local actresses to shoot demo scenes to send to Anne as proof of his filmmaking and acting skills. So yeah, this film is about Adrian, who loves cats and is obsessed with Anne Hathaway's performance as Catwoman in The Dark Knight Rises. And basically, he wants her to come wear the cat suit that he's made for her. And he's making a movie to send to Anne Hathaway to convince her that she should come and be in his movie, Be My Cat. So it starts off saying this film has been edited from 25 hours of footage found at the Be My Cat crime scene in Romania in May 20th, 2014. And apparently the film is actually, he recorded 25 hours of footage and then he's making, so this is a very interesting film with a lot of unique elements. So first of all, every scene in the film apparently is a first take. So there was no editing. Everything is done the first time. Was edited down for 25 hours of footage. Did you notice the picture of his mother in the background when he's talking about his life looks a lot like Anne Hathaway, I thought.
Oh, no, I didn't notice that. I missed that.
And then the 3 actresses he has, I think all have kind of a resemblance to Anne Hathaway. Yeah. He apparently is a method actor from traditional theater. So that's his background. And the first time that he meets these actresses in the film is actually the first time that he's meeting them in real life. So he arranged everything via email. And so the first time we see him interact with these women in this film is actually the first time that this guy, Adrian, is meeting these actresses. And they just jump right into shooting, which is super unique. The dialogue apparently largely improvised. And I feels very authentic and very real. And apparently he also lived as this character for 2 weeks before actually doing any filming. So you have a very super meta film about a guy named Adrian making a movie about a guy named Adrian.
Totally.
Who I think we can talk about this. You can make an argument is also making a movie within the movie.
Yes.
And I think that's where the debate lies. But it's I love this movie. And I think this is a very special found footage film. But yeah, what were your reactions?
I would agree with you. I wouldn't go as far as love, but I recognized the unique elements of this film. And there were things, I think the most effective thing for me is how creepy the overlap is between him in real life and him in the film. And I'm not casting aspersions about maybe he's a murderer or something, but it's very unnerving to me that all the things you mentioned, like apparently, and I think we probably read this from the same place, but So on a limited budget, he was director, producer, writer, actor, editor, cinematographer, taking only one takes, partially like all of those.
There's no crew.
Yeah, no
it's
crew.
Him and these girls. Yeah.
And that's very creepy to me. That's commitment.
Yeah.
Right. So, and apparently this is, from what I understand from the other little bits of reading I've done, is that this is a planned trilogy.
Yeah.
I would say, so there were lots of things that I really liked about this film. And I think this is going to be a cult. It's already a cult hit.
Yeah, I think it is now.
But it's going to be a very uncomfortable watch for some. I think because of that cinema verite quality, like the reality of it, to me, it reminded me of Creep a little bit.
Yes, that's a good comparison.
And for me, that's what got under my skin the most, is that feeling that, is what I'm watching performance or is it reality? And to me, that's the most effective element of the film, is like, and there were elements of that in Creep too, is like, what am I watching? If I'm questioning whether something is scripted or real, that's an indication that there's some really good stuff going on.
That's why I think the film is so brilliant.
Yeah.
Like all these methods that he decides to use creates a film that just feels like you're actually watching.
Yes.
Even though it kind of uses, and I feel like a bit of a hypocrite here, because last episode we were saying, we were talking about Noroi, about kind of reusing similar conventions. And so he isn't really doing anything new.
No.
But it's so authentic and feels so real. And he builds a psychological profile for this Adrian character that feels like a real kind of disgruntled incel guy with delusions of grandeur. Like it feels, I don't know if you felt this way. He feels like sympathetic and almost likable. He's so passionate about this project, and he's so kind of like bubbly and happy the way he talks, and he smiles a lot. Like he is kind of charismatic in a way, or I found myself kind of drawn. I kind of liked his character until obviously then he does these horrible things.
And I think that's part of why the film is successful as a horror film as well, because of the dichotomy of his frenetic energy and passion and the things that he's doing. It's such a striking dichotomy that it throws you off as a viewer, because you do, I mean, he would be very annoying as a real person, but you do appreciate his energy and his passion for his project, what he's trying to accomplish.
Yeah.
But then what he's willing to do to accomplish it is the horrific thing about the film.
Yeah.
It's very psychological and very meta. And I think that allows the viewer to really dig in. Like I could see subsequent viewings of this really giving something back to you as a viewer.
Oh, totally. And we can talk about it, but there's an element I would be curious to go back and watch this film for. But apparently I did watch an interview with him.
Okay.
And he actually is normal. Like it's almost weird to see the interview of him because he plays this character so well. And because in the movie, he breaks, sometimes it's hard to tell whether he's playing a character in the movie or being himself in the movie.
Right.
And maybe there's not a big difference between those two things. But he is actually a normal guy. But I guess that his whole trilogy thing it's about like a meta filmmaking.
Yeah.
So I think the second one, he said, has something to do with like 2001 Space Odyssey. And the third one has something to do with Young Frankenstein.
Oh, so is it the same character?
Yeah,
No. Oh, okay.
It is Adrian, I think.
Oh.
But they're doing different things. But he said one of the reasons he wanted to make the first film a horror movie for Be My Cat is his theory is that horror films put a mirror in front of the audiences, a mirror in which they see reflected their darkest and most violent subconscious impulses. And so they become aware of them and get to control them in real life, which might also be why he thinks one of the reasons why most horror fans are non-violent people.
That's very interesting.
That was his like idea for creating this thing.
I'm sure you came across this as well, but so this character started as a 15-minute monologue.
Yes.
That he turned into a 50-minute one-man show called The Monster and then adapted it for the screen.
Yeah.
And to me, the evolution of that character, like doing something for 15 minutes and then 50 and then, an hour and a half-ish kind of film, that's very fascinating to me, how that character has evolved and how long he's lived with this idea and developed this idea. And I think that part is testament to how well the character comes across on screen, how authentic the character comes across.
So authentic.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the interactions he's having with these actresses is legitimately the first time,
Yes.
and they're supposed to react to him, but because they've never even met him before and he's acting super weird and creepy, like it feels like their reactions are totally authentic and genuine.
It's super interesting too, because I know this is a debate amongst actors, and there was that whole what's the movement called? You know, like the Strasberg technique, and in acting, like this authentic James Dean was this as well. Oh shoot, I can't remember. It's totally gone for me. Like method acting, right? There's a debate amongst, particularly I think more recent actors, that if you're good at what you do, that's what an actor does, is create authenticity for a particular scene. But I have to wonder, seeing this, could you recreate what he creates by doing a single take, meeting somebody those are things you can argue that a good actor can do that, but there's an edge to something that I wonder if it's inescapable if you're doing it the way he's doing it, where you create the scenario for the first time, you do it in one take, and there's no polish. I have to wonder whether that's in this situation a better way to do it.
Yeah.
Because it creates that authenticity that you can't recreate.
100%. I just think that's why this works. And on paper, maybe it's not doing anything that spectacular. Like it is just this guy talking to these girls. And I don't think it does anything super unique on the surface, but it's this authenticity in the way he goes about doing it, that it just has this energy that feels super authentic. Interesting too, he said he was inspired by Carrie.
Oh, interesting. The original, like the De Palma film?
Yeah. And so he said, like in that film, it's similar. So you sympathize with her.
Yes.
And she's being bullied and terrible things are happening to her. But then in the end, like she's the one who's doing destructive things.
Yes.
Like she's kind of the villain in a way. And so I guess he kind of modeled this character after Carrie. So you kind of sympathize with him. He alludes in the film to have been bullied. It's like, I like cats and I like girls, but I don't like dogs and I don't like men.
Yes.
Because men are bullies.
Yeah.
And so you get the sense that this guy's been bullied. And I guess he said he actually was bullied as a child. But he said like the most effective characters in horror films are a paradox. I think what you were kind of alluding to earlier. And so like that character Carrie is a bear of paradox. And in this case, he's so kind of happy and sympathetic on the one hand, but then a terrible human being on the other hand.
Yeah. Well, and I just, I had a question for you, because I didn't realize how many awards this had been nominated for and how many things. Yeah, it had won. I ran across one critic called this a hidden gem and somebody else called it a must see. Would you put it in either of those categories for
Both.
you? Both.
Yeah.
Okay.
I do think it's a hidden gem because I don't think many people know about this film.
Totally not on my radar until you mentioned it.
I'll give credit to Jay of the Dead, and I think it was his New Horror Movies podcast. It was when I first heard about this one, and they spoke very highly of it. But that was years ago. But I always took a mental note, like, okay, I have to watch Be My Cat at some point. Yeah, I think it's brilliant. Is it hyperbolic to say like he should win an Oscar for this? Like in terms of acting and performance, I just think it's incredible.
It's a pretty outstanding performance to be able to, on this kind of indie budget, I think he was in his hometown in Romania making this, to sustain, like I feel there's a consistent, sustained energy with this character. Like I never feel like he's out of character.
No.
Because oftentimes you'll watch a performance and you'll think, okay, well they nailed this bit, but then this bit seems a little off. I never felt that. Like I always felt like this was Adrian of the film.
Yeah.
And even those subtle shifts between his manicness and the darker side were just masterful. I thought like it was very, very well done.
And like he is talking to kind of Anne the whole time. So
Yes.
like the actress he's interacting with maybe doesn't know something, but oh, sorry, Anne, like I have to do this for you. Or like, please forgive me for this thing. Or like, oh, like, look, I got this chloroform. Like just the way he goes about it is just, I was just so engaged. Like from the first second he starts talking to the end of the movie, I just could not take my eyes off the screen.
And
that's all credit to his performance, I think.
Yeah, and there's nothing fancy about the sets. Like it's very low key all the way through. And I did you read this as well? That am I remembering that the final conversation with the final actress that's left, that's all improvised. Like he said to her, or she came up with the idea of trying to convince him.
Yeah. Apparently most of the dialogue in this movie is improvised, which I've seen in like Curb Your Enthusiasm and stuff, and I think is kind of effective. But that's, again, which makes it feel so authentic. Yeah. Is there anything else that you want to say, maybe in the non-spoiler realm? Or here's, I guess, what I would say.
Okay.
So how do you... the thing that made him so realistic to me was, do you get the sense that he was truly super passionate about this film and about Anne Hathaway and the cat thing? Or do you feel like he created a story and a rationale and a reason for him to do terrible things to people? So is he like, how could I get away with like justifying like torturing women or killing women? Like, oh, well, because he keeps saying like, oh, this is for the performance.
Yes.
This is my dedication to acting. This is my dedication to the role. And it was the thing that made it feel so realistic to me was like, that's almost like a defense mechanism. Right. So people try to like, do whatever they have to do to justify something that maybe that isn't right. So I was like, is he actually super passionate about this film, or is this the story he's created for himself to justify him doing these things? Did that come up for you at all?
That's a really interesting question, because I don't know that you can distinguish the two if it's done well, which it is here. I don't know if I could say whether he's rationalizing or whether he actually feels how he describes he feels, because he does over and over and over again talk about like, I'm doing this to get this performance out of these actresses, but you wouldn't have to do that, Anne, because I know you're already a good actress.
Yeah.
And of course there's all of that paradox in there about, I'm doing these things to show you how committed I am, but I wouldn't do them to you.
Yeah.
Even though it's like, because that was the other thing that I felt was because we all know of stories of actors that have received threats or have stalkers or whatever. And I kind of put myself in a place mentally where I was, Anne Hathaway receiving this, thinking, holy Jesus, like what the hell?
Could you find that? I tried really hard to see if she had a reaction, a public, like if she had acknowledged the film anywhere, and I couldn't find it.
No, I couldn't find it either.
Really like to know, like, A, has she seen it, and B, like, what's her reaction to that? Or I wonder, did he as a director reach out to her? Just be like, hey, by the way, I'm making this film about you. Don't be creeped out.
Yeah. Yeah. Cause if you receive this as a performer, that would be terrifying.
Oh God. Yeah.
That somebody, whether it was local or in another country, doesn't matter, but that somebody was that devoted to you that they were, doing things to other people that are horrific.
Yeah. Did you see Don't F with Cats?
Yes.
The Netflix documentary. So that's a real documentary about a guy who like tortures cats and is a serial killer. But like, to me, he reminded me of the guy from that movie. Like, he just feels so real and his psychology is like so rich. And you could just see this like incel guy who,
for sure,
delusions of grandeur, like obsessed with Anne Hathaway. Like, it's maybe almost a slightly problematic, because it seems like this guy has almost like a disability, or like you're not sure if he's all there.
100%. That was the other thing I was going to say about whether or not he's actually feeling the things he's talking about, or whether he's rationalizing. I don't know if that matters, because he's so dissociated from reality that he probably does believe what he's saying and what he's espousing. He certainly wouldn't be able to make the distinction that he's rationalizing, because he's so disconnected from reality. And I think, again, coming back to that idea of Creep and this one, that's what makes it successful and creepy, to use that word, that the performances seem so authentic and genuine. That's like, it really got under my skin watching him.
That's the difference. I think like Creep is really good. It's doing something very similar, because it doesn't go to the lengths that this one goes for the authenticity. You still kind of feel like you're watching a found footage film at the end of the day.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I guess he's a known actor, the guy from...
Fair enough. Yeah.
But in this case, like if I didn't know any differently, I would totally think that this was real.
Absolutely. I mean, yeah, how he looks, how he talks, the energy that he, like I've got frenzied there, but that
it is the energy.
Yeah. It's that,
like he's almost like frothing at the mouth at times, the way he's talking in like a gleeful kind of happy, excited way. Yeah, just a super fascinating character.
Because if you didn't know better, watching the character, you think this person is mentally unbalanced.
Yes.
And it's very convincing that they're mentally unbalanced. It's not so far to the extreme that you think, okay, well, that's way over the top. It's just enough that you think, okay, there's something wrong with this person.
Yeah.
But there's also just enough reality or realism or authenticity that you think, okay, well, maybe they're just passionate about what they're doing.
And it really hit home for me when I watched the interview with him on YouTube because, okay, yeah, you're just a normal dude talking like very passionately, but like thoughtfully about your film. And like, he didn't have that kind of manic-y, frantic-y energy he had in this movie. So it's like, yeah, that's just a damn good performance. Like a damn good performance.
And again, we've talked about this before. I think it's unfortunate. You talked about this with Mia Goth and Pearl.
Mm-hmm.
A performance like this probably will go unrecognized, partly because it's an indie film, partly because it's a horror film, partly because of the subject matter, and people would be creeped out by that.
Yeah, I don't see them giving this any play at the Oscars.
Yeah, so I mean, it's unfortunate because I do think that something like this would go unrecognized when it's such a powerful performance in what he does.
And like, not to compare it to Noroi, which we talked about last time, but I do feel like this is a film that you could watch this in 20 years and it would still hold up.
Oh, for sure.
Because the performance is so good. Even though it's not really doing anything unique, it's not like host with a Zoom call or a live chat like Deadstream. Like it's a pretty straight, like here's this guy making this movie with found footage, but his performance is just next level.
Once you get over, and I'm agreeing with you, because I think once you get over the idea of it being found footage, a lot of it could be a conventionally shot film.
Yeah.
Other than the fact, obviously he's breaking the fourth wall, but other than the found footage element, this could be a conventional film and we could just be viewers. I mean, other than the fact that he's actually talking to the camera.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I see this definitely standing up and I can understand. I mean, I'm surprised. Maybe I'm not a big enough fan of horror films, but I'm surprised it was off my radar for so long.
Yes, you'd not heard of this one before? Yeah, and it's free on Tubi. So, and YouTube actually. The director released the whole film. You can go watch it for free on YouTube. And
I did not
he was
realize
like
that.
totally fine with that.
Yeah,
So
I watched it on Tubi. Yeah.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Should we give our final thoughts? And then there's a few spoiler things I'd be curious to chat with you about.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely feel this is worth checking out. I think it's engaging enough as an average viewer that I think this could be a really good watch. It's not too long. The pacing is really good. His performance is outstanding. If you engage with it, it really got under my skin. Like it was uncomfortable to watch.
Yeah, it is.
And that's saying something, right? Like you've got an indie film. The performance is what makes you uncomfortable in the film because it's so believable that you think, okay, is this a performance?
Yeah.
And to me, that recommends itself.
Yeah, this might be a bold statement, but I might say that this is my favorite and perhaps the best found footage film that I've seen. Like,
wow.
I think this is superior. That being said, it might make some people uncomfortable because it's so authentic and realistic.
Yeah.
So if you know you were bothered by those things, you might want to avoid it.
That was a note that I made, is that I think this is a great film, but it would, for some people, would be very uncomfortable because of its reality.
Yeah, but there's no doubt to me that this is a special film. And if you're a horror fan or a found footage fan and you think you can handle the realistic nature of it, I 100% think you should watch it.
All right. So there's our recommendation, and we are entering spoiler territory.
Spoiler territory. Okay, so
I just had an upcoming thing spoiled for me.
apparently, I don't know if you read this as well, when she calls the cops. So she actually called the cops and he didn't know about it, but she did it in character. So she thought it would be neat to like call the police to get that authenticity, but he didn't know that. So then the cops show up and I guess they explained it all away and it was fine. But that was crazy to me because when the cops came, I honestly wasn't sure. Like, is this the actual actress calling the police? Is this scripted?
Yeah.
And the way because they don't really show the cops too much,
Mhm.
and they kind of cuts at that point. So either that was like so brilliant of him to cut it that way, or it was real. So what was your reaction when you saw the police show up in that scene?
Well, I actually didn't know. Yeah, I didn't know that she had called the police like in real life.
Yeah.
And I think that could only happen in an Eastern European country where you could explain it. I think you'd be doing jail time if you'd done that here.
That's true.
Yeah, I mean, all I can say is fascinating. Like I again, a testament to the commitment and the meta nature of this film. Because unlike something like Cannibal Holocaust, which attempts to do some of these meta things, but does them horrifically with animal abuse and stuff like that, this one does it in a way that as you're watching, it's believable and authentic. But of course, in real life, none of these things really happened, right?
Yeah.
So, well, at least as far as I know, none of these things really happened. Yeah, I'm just blown away by that. Now, was that the actress at the end, the final one, or was that one of the other ones?
The first actress.
The first one. Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
And so I came across this theory I think is super interesting. So is this a movie about Adrian making a film for Anne Hathaway, or is this a movie about Adrian making a movie? And the hint that someone mentioned is that when the girls are being tortured and when they're like in distress, they're speaking English, but they're Romanian. And they do speak Romanian in the film at different times.
Yeah, yeah.
So this guy's theory was that the movie is actually about Adrian making a movie. And so, because these girls, presumably when they're like having their guts cut, like the one girl who's being cut open, she's screaming for help and talking in English.
Oh.
But you wouldn't do that, right? If you were actually being tortured and killed, you'd probably do it in your original language.
I would think if you're under distress, you would default to your native language.
So the cool thing about this movie is, and he refers to it as kind of a meta film, and you can tell he put a lot of effort and thought into this. And I was like, oh, that's super interesting. So maybe we think we're watching a movie about Adrian making this film for Anne Hathaway, but in fact, we're watching him actually direct this movie.
Right.
But it's a movie. So that is kind of mind-blowing and crazy. But the language thing I find very convincing, because he does whisper to them at times in Romanian. And like when the cops show up, they talk in Romanian. But this idea that the actresses, when they're in distress, are doing it in English suggests that it's just about him making a movie.
I think with every actress, he reminds them in English. English, like he speaks to them.
Yes.
Now,
yeah, right away. Right.
Yeah. Huh.
Isn't that cool?
That is cool. And it's got my head spinning a little bit. Like, okay, so we're saying, so the theory is that because of those hints, it's actually the real person, Adrian, making a movie about himself making a movie.
Exactly.
Okay.
That it's on that extra meta level. And that's where I said at the beginning, when you said you could go back and watch this one again.
Yeah.
I'd be very curious to go back and watch this film again with that lens of, okay, is he actually talking about, is this actually just a movie about him making the movie?
The language is a convincing argument because I agree with you that
there are deliberate times in the film where they switch languages.
Yes,
so if you were to go back and analyze all those scenes, and the fact that when especially I think the one girl, when he's like,
yes,
you're too fat, and he's like cutting her body up, I guess, and she's screaming in English.
Are we missing anything obvious? Like, is there another explanation for that? Because I totally buy the argument that if that were real distress, you wouldn't be speaking in your second or third or whatever language. You would be, your mind would be going to your native language, I would think.
So that's where I think it'd be interesting to go back and see all the times where he's kind of whispering to the actresses in Romanian. Because you think he would just cut those scenes out if you didn't want them in the film. So they're obviously intentionally there, which makes me wonder, like, are these supposed to be hints that we're actually watching?
Yeah, 100%. Because considering how thoughtful and meta he is,
exactly,
there's no way that there's anything in this film by accident. Like with most films. Yeah. But
he used the term meta in the interview, but they didn't directly ask him this exact question. And so I don't have a real answer, but I think it's super fascinating.
And I wonder if he would have even answered it anyway. Like
perhaps
if
not.
He would have said, "Oh yeah, this is about." Because I mean, the thing I like about that sort of story is it keeps people guessing. It keeps people wondering. It keeps people going back and looking for details. And this movie deserves to be seen by a wider audience, because I have a feeling that it didn't have the release probably that it should have.
Yeah.
And it would be very cool to see this film get some recognition and get it seen, because it's not that old. It's only 7-8 years old.
Yeah.
So get it seen on wider screens. And I'm sure it did the festival circuit and all the rest of it. But I mean, in terms of the general viewer, if I hadn't sought this out, knowing its reputation and having recommendations, I probably would have just passed it by.
Yeah, when you see the cover, it looks a bit amateurish. Like you might think,
Totally.
this could definitely go either way.
Yeah.
I think I'm answering my own question here, but I think the ending. So when I talked about, is he actually passionate about Anne Hathaway, or is he like crafting this narrative to justify doing what he's doing? Because at the very end, it seems like she's convinced him to go pursue Anne, and he doesn't harm her, presumably.
Yeah, that's how I read it too.
Would suggest that he's actually genuine. Otherwise, he would want to kill her, and he wouldn't be like dropping everything he's doing to go. So what did you think of the ending? It was interesting because my wife was sitting in there with me, and I was like, oh, you might want to go because like this is probably going to ramp up. She's like, yeah, I'm out of here. And I was pleasantly surprised, I guess, or like impressed that was the ending. I thought for sure she was dead.
Me too. And I actually, pleasant surprise was sort of my reaction too. It was like, oh, that's an interesting way to kind of leave things, because it lets us know she's convinced him that if you really are as passionate as you seem, why are you wasting your time here making a film that she may, like, go to her, go do it. And that was very convincing to me. And he was.
Did you think that technique was going to work for her? Or did you think he was going to kill her?
I didn't know. In hindsight, I mean, he's so unstable that seems like such a great way to go about it. It's like, yeah, appeal to his vanity. Like, why are you spending time here? Go be with her and let her know. Like, to me, that seemed like a really smart thing to do. But no, I wasn't convinced at the time that it was going to work. I thought he would sort of lose it and kill her. But on the other hand, again, in hindsight, that's not really his character. He doesn't really fly off the handle and have these, episodes. He's passionate, and he does things to serve his passion of making the film.
That's his number one drive.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I think it was completely in character for him to leave and not harm her. And also to be genuine and say, don't worry. You just stay here for 15 minutes or whatever it was, and give me time to go to the airport, and I won't harm you.
Yeah. So to stick the landing of the ending as well of this film, which he could have had a great performance, but maybe it ends weird. But I was very satisfied, actually. I thought it was a cool ending.
Yeah, it was very unique, very different. And again, I thought in keeping with the character that he'd established all the way through the film, it was a logical conclusion, a logical progression for that character, because he wasn't worried about bodies or people finding or people hearing.
Well, so clever too that he went around and told everyone like, oh yeah, if you hear screaming, it's okay. We're just making a horror film. And at one point the guys actually come in and see her on the bed. Like, oh yeah, it looks good effects. Yeah. Okay. See you later.
Yeah, totally.
But that's kind of a smart way to do it. Like actually I could buy that would work. The only thing that took me out just a tiny little bit is when he's cutting that one girl up in the bed, and the blood, the way it hits the sheet.
Yeah.
Just looked kind of not right. I'm like, oh, that kind of took me out. That was the only time in the entire film where maybe I was taken out of the film a little bit.
But again, I mean, despite that actually didn't take me out of the film.
Oh, good.
But despite that, like, again, smart thing to do to just not show any of that. Because if you were a real indie filmmaker, you don't have a budget to do what, a big budget film could do by eviscerating somebody. So put her behind a sheet and show, like, imagine. And again, that idea of put your audience in a place where they can imagine what's happening without having to show them.
Which again, I think supports the thesis that perhaps this is about him making a film, because you never see anything happen to the girls where you'd be like, okay, well, that was real. Like the choking of the jeans, that could be faked.
Yeah.
And obviously we don't see anything actually happening. So I think that supports the idea that perhaps we are watching a movie about him make a movie.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just a super cool movie. I love the chloroform bit too. Like, oh yeah, it might smell a little funny. Don't worry, it's just water. And then he's like, don't worry, Anne, it's real chloroform. Like, this movie is just great, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely enjoyed it, and I was glad that I watched it because of the things that I've heard about it, and thought, yeah, this was something that I'm happy to have watched. Maybe happy is not the right word. I'm glad that I watched it though, and that I saw the performance, and I really do like those movies that are meta about movies, and so I love the fact that this would bear fruit if you went back and watched it again and thought, oh, what is he doing there? What is he doing there? Because you know that now I know that he's a very thoughtful filmmaker. So it wasn't an accident that something happened.
That's right.
So when you notice something, it's like, oh, that's what he's doing there. So yeah, I thought this was very well done.
I thought you might not like it because I know you don't like those hyper realistic horror films as much, like the ones that make you kind of uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And this really pushes the limit on that.
It definitely pushes it. And that's why I thought, wow, I could see somebody being very uncomfortable and not being able to watch this because you're so in the moment with him. You're so in the scene. I didn't feel that there's really a way to dissociate from what's happening. You have to invest because that's the energy and the performance that he's put in. You're there with him. And so I found, that very uncomfortable, but that's a good thing, I think.
Yeah. The other thing I thought when watching this, like, what would this movie be like if he was able to do all the things he did to make the performance feel so authentic, but then really went all in on like gore and nudity, and because he shows a lot of restraint in terms of like when he's undressing the girls I wonder if this would have had a lot more attention because he could have really pushed the envelope in terms of making you feel that much more uncomfortable. Like you're kind of spared a little bit because you don't see anything too horrific. The fascinating thing is this performance. I mean, what happens when you marry that level of authenticity with a performance with then like a Terrifier 2 style? Like that would be a super intense movie. I feel like marrying those two things together where it's like, this is really uncomfortable in terms of what you're showing me. And it's also feels so real and authentic at the same time.
Yeah, that's an interesting concept. Because my initial reaction when you started asking the question was, well, I mean, obviously he doesn't do it because of budget, but even if he could do it, excuse me, would that detract somehow? Because you know it's not real if he went to extremes. This way, I could almost convince myself that it was real because of the restraint.
Yeah.
Because again, the authenticity of his character, it's like he doesn't need to show those things because that's not what we're here for.
No.
He's just here to convince Anne Hathaway to make a movie with him.
For sure.
Ostensibly. So yeah, but it would be very unnerving to combine those two
I think
elements.
you could make one of the most uncomfortable horror movies ever if you combine those two elements.
Yeah.
Which is interesting that he didn't. I wonder if maybe it would get a lot more attention if it pushed that envelope as well.
I think so. Yeah, because the intensity of his performance matched with the intensity of the visuals that you're suggesting, like a Terrifier 2.
Because I wasn't sure, right? Like once he chloroforms the first girl, I'm like, oh, okay, like is he gonna, like how extreme is this? I was almost like getting nervous or uncomfortable. Like this film feels so genuine, authentic. Like how far is he going to go? And I was like, okay, he's showing actually a lot of restraint here, but he could have gone the other direction.
And again, I felt the same way because I was uncomfortable thinking, okay, are we going to digress into some sexual content?
Yes.
But again, true to his character, that's not what he was interested in.
Yeah.
That's not what he was there for. So I was trying to imagine this film, but with the Terrifier 2 bedroom scene.
Exactly.
And I was thinking, oh my gosh, that would be horrific.
But the dude seems so unhinged. It's like you could see that.
Yeah. Yeah. He's so disconnected from real life that you could see him.
Even when he's like gingerly like carrying her down to the basement, like, oh yeah, look, check this out. Like I got this little spot for her.
It's, I mean, very, very fascinating. And to reiterate what we've already said, like if you haven't seen this and you're either just a general horror fan or a found footage fan, you've got to see this.
Yeah, I agree.
100%. And even if you're not, I think, again, as I mentioned earlier, I think you can set aside the found footage thing pretty quickly. Like that's kind of, it's almost an aside. It's a frame for how he can do what he's doing as a filmmaker, but you don't need that frame to actually enjoy the film and understand what's happening. Yeah, it's really good.
Yeah, hats off to Adrian. I think he made a pretty kick-ass little film here.
Well done. So are we done? Do you want me to mention the next one?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. What do we have next
So
episode?
our next episode, we are going back to something that I've watched many times, but I don't think it gets its due. And I'll talk about that when we do this film. But we're doing The Cell from 2000 with Jennifer Lopez and Vincent D'Onofrio.
Jennifer Lopez.
Yes.
Right.
Not Lopez anymore, apparently. Affleck.
Oh, of course. Yeah.
Yes. And she did change her name, I understand.
And Vince Vaughn, right?
And Vince Vaughn.
Right.
Yes. I can't remember. There's a couple of other characters that are character actors that you recognize in the film, but their names are not on the top of my head.
I have not seen that one in a long time, so curious to check that out.
Yeah, I'm curious to see how it holds up for you.
Cool. Well, thanks for listening, and we'll see you in the aisles. Thanks so much for listening to Dudes of the Dead podcast, where Maniac Mike and Leatherface Lee break down their latest horror movie recommendations.
The show is researched, written, and hosted by Mike Vincent and Lee Neese. Produced and edited by Lee Neese. Special thanks to Aaron Jabs for the outro music. This has been a Neesely Done podcast production.